Are we free? Is our waking existence a free choice? Or is it an amalgamation of every event that has previously occurred? You see two doors. Which do you choose? Decisions, decisions.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to This is an Experiment, episode 9. Today's topic is free will. I'm here with my co-host, Adenise Tuman, and we are really excited to talk about free will today because I think it's been kind of brought up in other episodes thus far, and it's something that I'm super interested in. And I know Adenise, with his background in cognitive science, is very interested and probably more well-versed. So, are you ready?
I am ready. Hi, everybody. We didn't have an episode last week, but that's okay because this episode is going to be worth it.
Yes, it's going to be worth the wait. Absolutely.
It was our decision, our will to skip last week, if you will.
Ooh, so. That is a great segue. Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
So, should we just hop right into this?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, let's do it. So, free will. What is free will to you? Before I go into the actual definition of it, what is your definition of free will?
Free will for me is the idea that an individual being is able to decide whether or not they want to do a specific action on their own without any outside interference. And that is how I perceive free will.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much right. It's the ability to make and follow decisions solely based on one's control. In other words, it's self-determinism, meaning you decide everything that you do at all times, always. You create your own destiny.
Yep, which is, in fact, the opposite of determinism, which is the idea that everything is predetermined and that something called destiny or fate is in control, and we in fact have no influence on anything.
Right, exactly. So there's actually two types of, so when people talk about free will, right, they talk about freedom, obviously, freedom of choice. But obviously there are things called, things like illusion of choice. Like you think you have decisions, but in reality you don't. So the two types of freedom, there's two. Nick, two. Did you hear that? There's two types. I said two like 5 times. Like Jesus Christ, like we get it, man. Yeah, there's two.
We get. Are you sure there's not 3?
No, there's 2. I counted.
Okay,
1,
sweet.
Yeah, that's 2 for sure.
Got
Anyways,
all right.
So the two types. The first one is surface freedom, meaning doing what you want freely to fulfill your desires. Ooh. So basically doing whatever you want. Just to fulfill your needs. You want a burger, you go get a burger, right?
I think there's like a vine about that.
Is there?
You want some French fries and get some French fries. Bitch, you want a burger, go get a burger.
That's kind of what it is. But then there's ultimate freedom, and ultimate freedom is being able to satisfy desires and being the source of those desires. So the difference between surface and ultimate freedom is surface can be viewed as living in a simulation.
Whoa.
So the idea behind surface freedom is that you are in a simulated world or whatever, and these desires are from an external source. They're not really your desires. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that's the ultimate difference between ultimate and surface freedom. And there is something called the Frankfurt Case. And this kind of goes into more about surface freedom and ultimate freedom. Mm-hmm. And so what the Frankfurt Case is, it basically makes a case, right, that an agent still acts freely even though they can't otherwise. Meaning, I'm going to dive into this because it's kind of confusing. Imagine you're in a simulation, right? Or in some sort of experiment, we'll say.
Okay.
And you are the agent. And there is an external individual controller, this person that's controlling you, right? Mm-hmm. So you are the agent and you have a decision to make by time, we'll call time T. To make an action, we'll call action A. So you are an agent that has to make a decision by T for A. And now this outside party implants some sort of device, some sort of algorithm in your brain that will make you do action A if you do not do so by time T, right?
Okay, yeah.
So if you don't do it, that action will be committed anyways.
Okay.
However, there are cases where you do commit it out of your own will, out of your own quote-to-quote free will.
Mm-hmm.
So now comes the question, right? Is that actually free will?
It seems like semi-free will.
Semi-free will, right? So we can draw a parallel to this. We can draw a parallel to religion, all right? Okay. And I want to do this because I really want to kind of push boundaries in this episode specifically. We've kind of played it safe in previous ones, but I really want to push boundaries because I think free will is a really, really interesting topic. So if you're okay with that, I say we just do it, man.
Let's do it. Full send.
All right. So religion, right? We'll look at Christianity to be specific. Mm-hmm. We are born under the guise of having free will, but at the same time, we are told that God essentially has a master plan for us, right? Our life is determined according to his
plan, his infinite
his
wisdom,
plan, his will, right? Mm-hmm. So we can. So if we draw the parallel back to Frankfurt, we can view this outside party as God, and we can view the agents as us, humans, mm-hmm. right? So sure, we have free will, but is it really free will if that will was already determined to occur?
No.
To us, right? To us, sure, it's free will, mm-hmm. but in the base reality of things, it's actually not free will, right? Because it's determined that you were going to do that anyways.
Yeah, you were predetermined to make that decision, so therefore it is not like purely free will because it's not something that you came up with. It's not a situation that you just came up with in your own mind. It's something. It's an outside source, which I think is just I think that's kind of the basis of there not being purely free will, at least for us, just because there is so many outside interactions.
Yeah,
okay,
exactly.
I have a question. I want to get experimental here because this is an experiment.
Yes, exactly.
So do you think that with the advent of virtual reality, that we're going to be able to get to a point where free will, like pure free will, could be possible, where I create a situation in my mind that impacts the virtual environment, which then I make a decision upon?
So essentially, you're asking if whether or not in the virtual realm you are actually making a free decision. You're making it, ultimate freedom is what you're saying. Like mm-hmm. you are the source of the decision that you are making to fulfill a desire. Is that the question?
Correct.
No. I say that because, well, I see it as a no, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
So the decisions made in the virtual realm are sourced from an external individual, which is yourself. Mm-hmm. And you, in the event that we aren't living in ultimate freedom, if we are living in surface freedom, then no, because that decision that you are making is to fulfill a desire that is external of your own. You see what you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you like, is that making sense? If not, I'll try to like word it.
No, I think I see what you're saying, that the desire, because we ourselves are not exercising pure free will, that desire, which is seeding the free will, the pure free mm-hmm. will is not mm-hmm. in itself purely free. So
exactly.
It's kind of like it just like keeps like going back to the roots in that like this probably isn't base reality, or it is some sort of simulation.
Yeah, exactly. And what we could actually do is we can look at something called the Bootstrap Paradox. It's kind of like going away from free will, but I'm going to apply it to free will. So the Bootstrap Paradox, or I think it's called like the grandfather we've talked about it before, like very, very briefly. I think you probably remember, where there's a cycle that is occurring, right, or a loop, and there's an external variable. Jesus Christ! Once you put that external variable into the loop, it will be as if that variable was always a part of the loop, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, so if you imagine, right, like let's say we create an infinite amount of virtual worlds, like a virtual world within a virtual world. Imagine the game Sims, right?
Yeah.
Imagine we get to a point where, Sims like 50, whatever, where now you can make your Sims make Sims.
Yeah.
Right. And then those Sims can create more Sims. And like the game continues. It becomes an infinite number, right? Essentially.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So the decision that you make, and assuming we're in base reality, you and I are in base reality, the decision you make is, and assuming that it's from surface freedom, which is doing a will external of your own, your decision that is put into the Sims creates a cycle in that Sim where their decisions create the decision for the Sim within that Sim, and then so on and so forth, right?
Yep.
But if you pull it back all the way to base reality, the first decision, the source decision, was a decision not made from free will. So how do we get to this? Jesus Christ. I went down a rabbit hole.
We were talking about virtual reality and
virtual reality. Yeah, exactly.
And so the analogy was Sims, and that at the base of it all, because we ourselves are likely not in we are in surface freedom. We're not in a situation where we have purely free will. Mm-hmm. It's like kind of a domino effect, so that every virtual reality that we came up with or come up with within a virtual realm is therefore also not purely free. It's some sort of surface freedom or a result thereof.
Yeah, exactly. And the Frankfurt case can also make a case against determinism, actually, right? Mm-hmm. So if we go back to that, like let's say there's a analogy that is made, or an example, right? So assume that there is an assassin, right? Mm-hmm. We'll call him, I don't know, we'll call him Nick.
Sweet.
We'll call this assassin Nick, right? And you are set on a course to assassinate some political figure, right? That's not actually what's happening. FBI, just chill. We're having So you are sent out to kill a political individual, okay?
Okay.
And however, you're doing this because you're contracted from, an X party. However, when you were asleep, that X party implanted a device into your head that by this certain date, if you do not, commit the assassination, you will still do it because the device will activate, forcing you to commit the assassination, right? Because it's for whatever reason, this X party finds it very, very important that you complete this task.
Yeah.
Let's say you do it though, right? Let's say you do it and you do it without the activation of that device. Okay, well, that right there should basically counter determinism, right? Because you did it out of your own free will.
Right.
Because you're unaware of the device, right? You're unaware of the device being implanted in you. So without knowing the device is there, like, oh, well, if I don't do it, I'm going to end up doing it anyway, so I might as well do it. So you're not influenced by the device in any way. So does that count, in your opinion, does that counter determinism, the Frankfurt case?
I don't know, because, well, yeah, I guess it does, because you're still deciding. But for me, there's a difference because, like, in determinism, right? Mm-hmm. I was like reading up on it, and there's like the classic example of Oedipus, where he was born, and then there was a prophecy that he would kill his father and marry his mother. But so the father leaves him in the woods, and he gets picked up by another couple who adopts him. He leaves that couple, ends up killing a stranger on the road, and then marrying that stranger's widow. Well, the stranger and the widow were his biological father and mother, right? So it happened anyways. I guess so. So that's the idea that, like, that's like the example that there is no free will in sort of like a mythological type of story. what you're saying is also kind of, made up story of these implants and things, but I'm still like kind of getting the same idea, except for that there is a choice dependent on a time t, that variable where if it's not completed by a specific moment in time, then it will happen anyways. Well, I feel like we're not going to get too deep into this now, but time is relative, right? So to me, it almost seems like we're adding a variable that's not necessarily defined, with it being time, and therefore probably it still is determinism. And just, I don't know, I'm not getting too deep into it. Just the idea of time and not being a not super defined variable, I feel like it's still determinism in a way.
Interesting. So because time is not defined, you would say it's considered determinism?
Right, because you can make that value for t infinitely small, right?
Right. So okay, let's say by tomorrow 5:30 p.m. then the device activates. Now you have a defined variable of time.
Right, but let's say you make that time 5 milliseconds or 1 millisecond. You know what I'm saying? Like it's just a value. So now we're getting into how we perceive time. But if you brought that time down to an infinitely small amount of time, then you have, like, I feel like a situation where you're at the cusp of free will and not free will. You know what I'm saying? And that's why I feel like this, because are you presenting an alternative idea to determinism and free will, or like are you presenting what is the idea of this Frankfurt idea?
So it's basically arguing. It's how I view it. I view it as it could argue for or against determinism, but in this case, I think it's actually arguing against determinism because the individual committed act or had the opportunity to commit an act according to their own will.
Okay.
According to their own decision, I guess you could say, instead of will. So.
Yeah. I mean, I think it would still be determinism and or surface freedom, just because, I mean, if this was like a hypothetical situation, you know what I think would make this example work in a counter to determinism is if that was the first event in all of space and time. If that was the first event. So if we're talking about theoretically nothing had happened prior to that situation, there was just a person and another person and the overseers of this simulation, right? And that the overseers put an implant and said, you have to kill that other person by that amount of time. Otherwise, we're just going to make you do it. If that was the first situation, there was no predetermined, neither individual had experienced anything else. There was nothing, like, it was just, they were there and then that was the decision placed before them. Then I think maybe that experiment would make sense. But just because there's so many other experiences, like that individual's emotions, beliefs.
So there's different variables, right?
There's so many variables going on in that person's mind that I feel like it's still predetermined. Like there's still so many different effects leading up to that decision that you can't say they really have a choice. However, if that person was just like conceived right there in the moment and they had that choice, then maybe that would be considered free will.
Okay. I think you actually did a really, really good, you gave a really good example, because I do believe, since you mentioned it, I think that's a good way to transition to this. I do think that because ultimately determinism, right, it's a view where all events are determined, right, or predetermined by existing causes. So, I keep using like killing examples. I don't know why. Like if somebody, kills a family member of another individual,
mm-hmm.
that may cause that the victim to react or to react badly, right? Because now, like, sure, it is their quote unquote will or free will, their decision to carry out, a retaliation towards the assaulter.
Mm-hmm.
But that decision is made from pre-existing causes.
Right. The emotion, the pain,
Right.
like all of those different things.
Exactly.
Which are
Yes.
just biological reactions to the situation.
Yes,
Well, not just
exactly.
biological, but, emotional.
Yeah, psychological, emotional, this, that, and the other. Exactly. So how could free will exist? Because there are so many variables involved, right? Like you said, there are so many variables involved that the only way that we can quote to quote have free will is if there are absolutely no pre-existing causes, right? Again, going back to religion, sure, we have free will, but we are doing these things with the presumption that doing these things will lead us into heaven, right?
Right.
So is that really free will? Because if you had free will, you would carry out an act either way,
Right.
like regardless of a potential consequence. But because now that there is a variable consequence of going to hell, you're going to carry out an act. So is that really free will?
Yeah. No, I mean that could be said about just pretty much anything, which is
Pretty much anything, right?
Which is why there's not a huge argument for the idea of free will. But at the same time, I wouldn't let that like freak people out, because I feel like or upset people, I would say, because I feel like if anyone were to hear that, they'd be like, well, that's upsetting. Like, I don't have any of my own decisions. The fact of the matter is that there's so much that we as humans are not capable of fully grasping, right? So I don't think just because we can't fully grasp the idea of free will, that we can't attain it, doesn't mean that we shouldn't enjoy the perception thereof, right? We can perceive our experiences that we do have free will, and that is perfectly fine. Like the idea that we are experiencing freedom, like free choice and everything, like that's a beautiful thing, that we can think that that's what's happening. But whether or not that's what's actually happening is probably not true.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, I think that facade is necessary for our existence, because, okay, I was just thinking about when you were talking, when I was thinking of like the idea of conception of that guy, of the man who had the choice, right? We think, like, if you look at like a baby, like a freshly born child, I feel like as a grown human, you look at them and you say, oh, they don't know anything, they don't understand anything, yet they probably have the closest thing to free will, which is like mind-boggling, because their experience is so fresh and so new. They have so little predetermined for them. I mean, obviously their existence is predetermined, right? Like they are a result of an interaction between two individuals, and that interaction was caused by a million other things. But for that specific child, the idea of free will, I feel like that's like the closest you can come to it, just because there's so little influencing your existence up until that point. Like, you don't have your own thought up until that point. You know what I'm saying? I mean, obviously in the womb, and then there's that whole debate of like when consciousness kind of comes about within the womb. But I don't know, like when you think of a child and you think to yourself, wow, they don't understand or know anything. But at the same time, I feel like they also yield the power of being like the closest to actual free will.
I kind of agree with you, but I'll make a counter argument. I'm very like anti-free will in this conversation, in this episode. I don't know why, but so sure, right? Yeah, they have the decision, or the closest thing to free decision as anybody could in this level of reality.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to also consider that biologically they don't have free decision making, right? Because biologically, if something occurs, right, they have an innate reaction to move away. Like if they saw, I don't know. Well, I guess like you could make an argument where like how a baby crawls up to a snake because they don't know how dangerous that snake could be, and they just
right.
But assume they get bit by the snake. Obviously, the snake isn't poisonous, whatever. There's going to be a biological reaction. They're going to retract from the snake, right?
Yeah.
Or so you would think. So do they have free will?
I mean, no, I think what you're bringing up is a super interesting point in that there seems to be some sort of balance, right? Like the baby probably is closest to experiencing free will as you can within an individual human's lifetime. However, they're super vulnerable and their decisions are practically made for them by their caregiver, whoever that may be.
Right. Yeah.
And then also with what you're just saying, there's this whole, like, I think we could get into a whole nother discussion of instinct and how we kind of have drawn the line between what is our perceived free will, or what you call it surface freedom, right? Surface, is that what you were calling it?
Surface freedom, yeah, that's where you're fulfilling a desire, but essentially it's like from an external source.
Okay, yeah. So there's a line, right, between instinct and surface freedom. If you put your hand on a stove or a hot surface, and your body pulls away, that's instinct, right? Like that's there's like a part of your brain like towards the spinal column where that decision's made, right? Am I right about that?
Yeah, so it's like in psychology, it's called operant conditioning. So when you put your hand on a stove, there's a negative feedback that comes from that. If your hand burns, that's negative feedback. Therefore, you won't commit that act again.
Right. No, but I'm talking about like, okay, but I'm talking about like the physical reaction of like you put your hand on the stove. It's like before you can even process it, your body pulls your hand away. There's like,
oh yeah. I mean, that has to do with like your nerve endings on your finger burning, and they shoot a signal to your brain like saying, "Hey, get the hell away."
Yeah.
That's,
exactly.
That's in layman terms, but yeah, that's pretty much what it is.
We would call that instinct. I mean, I think in the animal kingdom we see more so like acts of instinct where elephants know to migrate from one part of the savanna to the other across generations, and it's just like a known thing that they can do. So like, and we call that instinct, but then like with us, I feel like there's very few things we would coin as instinct. And then we like to say that we have so much of this perceived free will. I don't know. It's hard to say whether or not that's true.
So I think what happens then is the whole paradigm of consciousness comes into play, right?
Right.
Because like you said, like animals, in the deserts or in the fields of Africa, they mostly work off of like instinct, you would say, right? But then if there's like a conscious being like to the level of humans, then there's a lot more complexities that are now involved than just instinct, right? So I mean I don't know. I think so. Let me ask you this: Do you believe that there should be a line drawn between, like I said, like like biological instinct and decision making? Do you think those things should be separate, or should they be one and the same, or under the same umbrella, I guess?
I mean, I think we have to separate them. I mean, that's what humans do, is we categorize things, right? But I think that separating it is smart, because as a society we have to be able to define morals. And I think you could get into, okay, this is like kind of a funny example, but I'm sure you've probably seen the stuff about Kanye in the news, right? And so you have this guy who has this magnificent platform, who's getting people's attention, talking about some crazy stuff. And there's people that are saying, well, he has bipolar disorder and therefore his mind's not right, and you can't, and therefore he needs help. You can't put this on him. And then there's another camp that's saying, well, there's nothing, like, you can't play down the effect that this guy is having on people. You can't play down the idea that what he's talking about and the actions that he is taking are threatening the livelihood of probably a lot of people. So with that being said, can you say that, can you afford to not draw a line? Because I feel like that is where a line can be drawn, where you can say, okay, this guy is mentally ill, but he still has to be making some sort of decision. You know what I mean? Like there still has to be consequences. And I think in society we have to say there has to be a line drawn, because we have to and it's all probably an average, right? Where we look on average, okay, this is probably an instinctual response, and this other thing is a decision, whether that be surface freedom or actual free will. And therefore, when they choose wrong, there's consequences involved in that action. And if they choose right, there could be, rewards or whatever that may be. And I think that's the important part of drawing that line, is just the societal, overall, on average, societal growth and success, I would say. That's why it's important.
Okay. So you make a argument that they should be separated, biological instinct and decision making, right? Just to that's the summary of essentially everything, right?
Right.
Okay. So let me make this argument for you, or against that. So sure, Kanye, so okay, before I do, I'm kind of still confused about so could you further explain like how Kanye is correlated with biological instinct and decision making? Just could you just clear that up, because I didn't really catch. Okay.
So basically what I was trying to say was the guy is mentally ill. Let's assume that he's mentally ill. His mind is not firing properly, whatever the chemical biophysical reason for the bipolar disorder is, what he has claimed to have in the past. Whatever that may be, the argument is that he still has a choice to not be so hurtful to society, to the future election, to the people around him, whatever that may be, right? So I guess the argument would be that is that actually true, that he does have that choice? Does he have the free will to not do that? Or is it because he's mentally ill that he's acting like this, and therefore there's no other situation where he wouldn't be, having this presidential campaign, having these rallies where he's saying a bunch of nonsense, calling out his, spouse on Twitter, whatever it may be? That's all a result of the illness in his mind? Or does he have free will and have a choice not to do that, not to do those things, even though he is bipolar?
Okay, I think I got it. So we're categorizing his assumed mental illness as biological,
right? And
then his decision making as we're categorizing it as decision making.
Exactly.
So is that
yes?
Got it. So, and you believe that, or the argument that we're making is that those two should be separated, right?
Right.
Okay. So you can also make an argument that his biological instincts, or the biological category, somehow influence the decisions that he makes.
Right.
So therefore they are correlated and they could be viewed under the same umbrella.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because ultimately, right, to him, okay, this is assuming he is mentally ill. So we're just going to assume that. I don't want to keep saying it. So we're going to assume that he has some sort of mental illness, right? Bipolar disorder, or whatever it may be.
This is an assumption.
Yeah. So because he has that, his perception, his view is different than what we call averages, right?
Right.
There, there's a whole argument where averages don't really actually exist, but that's a different argument. Assuming averages, right? Psychologically, there's a guideline, a standardized, I don't know what to call it, protocol or whatever, or like a paradigm called the DSM, right? Diagnostics something manual, or it could just be diagnostic manual. And there's different versions. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Obviously the latest one is the most adapted to current society, because norms change. This is why averages change. So averages don't really exist because they're actually very they could be viewed as subjective in a social science sense, I would say, because they can always change, right? They can always shift.
Yeah.
So they're not a constant, but let's assume, right? So the DSM-5 is the latest one, I believe. Under the DSM-5, assuming we'll say he is mentally ill, right? Therefore, his perception in reality of his own reality is completely different than what is considered the norm perception of reality. So to himself, he's making complete sense, and he's completely he's not manic. He has no sense of mental ailments or skewed perceptions of reality. He's fine when what he's saying is fine to him.
Right.
However, in the norm of reality that we consider norm, he's not fine. Right. So that is why. So like that is why I think it's important. You have to take a step back, because if you zoom in too much, then it becomes very convoluted, because there are a lot of variables involved, like a lot.
Yeah.
But if you view it from kind of literally from an experimental perspective, where you're the observer, right? You're the scientist or the researcher. You could say that this individual's biological whatever has some sort of influence, or has significant influence towards their decision making, which ultimately goes back to determinism, right?
Right.
Like who this person is because it's kind of a paradox, actually. This person is because of the decisions he makes, and the decisions he makes is because of who this person is.
Right. Yeah.
It's kind of like a parrot, right? So,
yeah. I mean, so like, I think the term you used earlier was like agent, and I'd like heard that before.
Agent. Yeah.
And that's kind of the argument for actual free will, is that the agent is, as much as they are influenced by their surroundings, they are also influencing their surroundings, the environment.
Right.
So like a guy goes and chops down a tree, and that tree falls on another person. That person was influenced by the tree, but the tree was influenced by the other person that was chopping down the tree. So like, it's like a kind of relationship between the environment and the individual. And like how, I mean, to me, that kind of makes sense. But at the same time, like basically what you're saying, when you take a microscope to that situation, you have to go look at all the reasons that person was chopping down that tree. And then I think when you look at those reasons, you then begin to understand that there is no free will, because that was all predetermined. That moment was predetermined. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
If you take a very macroscopic view of the situation, okay, the guy chopped down the tree. He decided to do that, and that caused an effect on the tree. It fell down and hit the other person, and then that person was affected by the tree, which was affected by the person before. However, you look at the microscopic events within that. The seed fell there. The tree grew. The guy was born. He made all his decisions to become a lumberjack. The guy went for a run one day, and he was running and was there at that exact moment because of all the situations that happened in his lifetime. And you begin to understand that really it's not what it seems to be.
And you know what a perfect phenomenon we can use for this example?
What is it?
Do you know? I think you know. Think about it.
Oh, no. College. Don't go to college.
It's a scam. No. Butterfly effect.
Oh, yes.
Right?
Yes.
The phenomenon where a minute, small detail can completely change a complex system somewhere else. Meaning, something that happens, right, can have a nonlinear effect on an entire system. You know, like the example, the reason it's called butterfly effect, right? You know, a butterfly flaps its wings and somehow eventually a hurricane or a typhoon will occur, right? Because the flap of their wings somehow changes the atmospheric pressure in the sky, which catalyzes a reaction that cascades into a hurricane or typhoon occurring, right?
Right.
I mean, you know, that's a very like holy shit, how the hell does that, how the hell does a flap of a butterfly's wings cause a hurricane? It's an example. Yeah, it's all connected. So, it's an example too, obviously.
Right. So, okay, here's the thing. So there's a philosopher, Baron Dolbach. I hope I'm saying that correctly.
Okay.
He said none of our actions are actually free. And he also implied that basically everything that happened after the conception of this reality is the result of that moment, which kind of like that. That basically is what determinism is, right? Like from that moment where everything came to be until now, it's the result of that first moment. So whatever was set into motion, however that everything began from that moment in time until now, there was every sequence of events is intertwined and related, and the causation of all those events is this, and the result is this, which is like kind of mind-boggling. But when you keep, it's called like it's kind of like a subcategory of determinism called reductionism, I think. And so you're reducing everything to that one moment in time, which I think is basically kind of how you would look at things.
Yeah. So yeah, Baron Dolhovic or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So he is what you would call a hard determinist. And what a hard determinist is, it assumes that determinism is real, right? So going back to what determinism is, just to kind of like lay it all out. So determinism is the philosophical view that all events are determined completely by previously existing causes, right? So that's what determinism means. Now, hard determinism assumes that determinism is real, or true rather, and because of that reason, free will is an illusion. So that's what hard determinist is. There's things like soft determinism and compatibilism and things like that, and incompatibilism. But Baron was a hard determinist. So yeah, I think, and yeah, what you're saying. So like the whole view of reductionism, where everything can be broken down to the smallest particle or to the smallest thing, right?
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I don't know where were we going with that? We end up in these rabbit holes, and we're like, wait, where are we?
Yeah, I don't really remember where that started, but I just remember.
We were talking about the butterfly effect.
Oh, right. So basically, in that example, I guess you'd be reducing the hurricane to that flap of a butterfly's wings.
Okay, that makes sense now, yeah.
And then you could extrapolate that to the beginning of time is kind of what I was going for, I guess.
Interesting. So everything that has occurred up until this point is the result of the Big Bang.
Yes, theoretically, yes.
Okay, so let me ask you this, because now it's getting interesting, right?
Okay.
So sure, it could be reduced to that point, but if we're assuming that, between you and I talking right now and the actual Big Bang, there's a big gap, right? Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of things that occurred between that gap, and there's a lot of variables. So can we both agree that you can make a connection between you and I right now and the Big Bang, so long as we make the connections like tracing back, right? Like each action that occurred tracing back to the Big Bang. Then we can say, okay, we are here doing this because of the Big Bang. Can we agree with that?
Yes, but at the same time,
okay,
like we would be saying, I feel like that something impossible is possible. You know what I'm saying? Like the likelihood that this moment is happening therefore, like if you accounted for all the different realities that could have happened, like you're statistically, like that would be like, it'd be like impossible, you know what I mean? Which is just, that's what's mind-boggling. And I think that's why we are wired to kind of believe that we do have free will and that everything is kind of based on our decisions. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because that concept is just insane to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Because like if we assume that we can trace this action all the way back to the Big Bang, then we can assume that we are directly correlated because of the Big Bang. Like our action now is directly correlated because of the Big Bang, right?
Right.
That's ultimate. That's ultimate. Right.
Which would just be fate or destiny, I feel like.
Fate, right.
Yeah.
However, let's assume one thing was different, right? Like one thing changed somewhere along the line, not even recent times, right? One little thing was different.
Yeah.
Do you think we would still be here?
Absolutely
right
not.
now.
Nope.
Isn't that crazy?
And I think
like something completely unrelated. Sorry, I'm cutting you off. But
no, go ahead.
I'm just going to close. I'm going to close out the thought real quick.
Yeah.
Something completely unrelated to you and I somehow affected the opportunity that you and I have right now.
Yeah.
Or the lack thereof.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
it's mind-boggling. And I think the farther you go back, the more extreme the difference would be between, like, if you change something 5 minutes ago, relative you change something 100 million years ago, I think that the ripple effect would be much greater. You know what I mean? It's like if there's a wave that starts like right near the shore, it's a small wave, but if it starts like way far out and it keeps going, it's huge by the time it gets to the shore. I think that's kind of how I perceive this idea that the smallest minute change, I think if you multiply that by the time ago that the change happened, you could have some serious differences. But yeah, no, I think it's kind of insane that everything had to happen as such for us to be in this exact moment that we're in right now, which is crazy.
Yeah, it's insane. Like there are so many variables that are in place, and kind of going back to the Bootstrap Paradox, like the whole example that's used is I'm going to, like, let's say you're a time traveler, right? Mm-hmm. Like you, Nick. I have a photograph or a note, right, that says, hey, younger me, this is from older me, right? And I give you this note, and I'm like, hey, go back in time and give me this note, right?
Right.
But that's the paradox. How am I giving you the note if I don't have it if I don't have it in the past?
Right.
So you see what I'm saying? Like, you're giving me the note, but I'm giving you the note to give to me.
Yeah, so it would have had to have always been there.
Exactly. That's the variable that I was talking about. That's the variable at the very outside. See, again, here I go. I wanted to correlate this back to okay, I guess what I was trying to say was, when you add a variable into the system, a small change within that system, it, like, if this variable affects even the smallest thing, it can completely cascade into something completely different. Like we wouldn't have a podcast. Maybe we weren't even alive or born.
Right. Absolutely.
It's crazy. So so to kind of go back though to free will, right? Like, we're talking about all these like philosophical things and things like that. I do want to kind of touch a little more on like hard evidence, because there have been individuals, there have been scientists that have actually put free will to the test. Ooh. So if you're down, let's kind of dive right into that.
Yep.
So the first thing, so this whole thing started in 1964. Two German scientists studied the electrical activity within a human's brain.
Okay.
They called it the Bereitschaft potential, which means readiness potential. And how they did it was, you flex your finger, and the flexation of your finger was recorded. So cool, whatever. Now, Lebet, you're familiar with him. We've talked about him previously before. Lebet kind of took this experiment to the next level. And now he had, several participants, or volunteers rather. He said, okay, tap your fingers at will, whenever you want. Tap your fingers, and each time that you tap it, that action will be recorded. And so what Lebet did during this experiment, he had an EEG. It basically reads the brain activity. It's a device that reads the brain activity. Mm-hmm. And this EEG revealed that there were electrical impulses, or electrical, I guess, potentials occurring in the brain several hundred milliseconds before the individual actually made the decision to perform each tap. So right before the individual, like literally right before the individual decided to, or was consciously aware of making decisions to tap, there was a brain activity.
Right.
So people are like, oh wow, that's crazy. Like that right there means free will isn't really free will, because there was already some sort of biological impulse or electrical potential that made them make this decision. You know what I mean? Like, had they not had this electrical potential, then they wouldn't have made that decision. Therefore, free will can't be real. So, that's kind of like taking it to the extreme. So then there was a article written by The Atlantic. It was written by Bahar. His name was Bahar. And he claims that the electrical potentials that Lebet was talking about in this experiment, it's actually a marker for the decision. Meaning it's not separate from the decision, but rather it's a marker for that decision being made.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Right.
And that kind of makes sense because, I mean, I don't remember the details specifically, but I feel like it was something like they had to notify when they were going to tap their finger. Like, because otherwise, how would they? Like, they had to notify when they were thinking of tapping their finger, and then when they did tap their finger. Is that? Or was it just straight up like tapping it?
I think it was tapping it. So he basically said, I'm assuming they like watched, right? Like Lebet watched when they tapped their finger. And he said, do it whenever you want. Just literally tap your finger whenever you want. Yeah, and then that's what the EEG revealed. It showed that there was some sort of electrical potential occurring before.
So is the 100 of milliseconds, is that not the kind of lag time between the electrical impulse in our brain and the physical response?
Right. So that could be, right? That could be exactly what it is. And that's kind of like the argument that is also made. Like, it's a part of the decision making. Like Elon said, right? Like the only reason that we don't have, the power of the world like instantly. We do have it at our fingertips, but there's a bandwidth lag, right? There's a bandwidth lag between our brain sending the signal to our fingers to search for whatever we are searching, right? Because when we read something, like the output is slow. The output of the brain telling us to search this is slow. But the input, us collecting the information, the input is quick.
Right.
So that's the argument. And then in 2009, there was a neuroscientist. His name was Aaron Scherger. I don't know how to pronounce these last names, man. Aaron. His name is Aaron. He's a neuroscientist, and he basically kind of agreed with the Atlantic, saying that it's a part of the decision making process, like that 100th millisecond electrical potential. So it's kind of up in the air, man. I mean, ultimately, it's kind of up in the air, but I think the topics that we have covered thus far leans more towards determinism, and that free will is ultimately not real.
Right.
So,
but the perception thereof is magnificent, and I think it's something we kind of have to rely on, because I don't know. I think it allows society as a whole to be better, because I think if you get to this mindset where you think, okay, well, nothing really is my own decision, like I just let everything happen like the way it happens, I think that could become kind of a dangerous game when you start talking about like morality and like decision making. There could be consequences for thinking that way. So I think that having the perception of reality or of free will is super important, and something that we should not take for granted.
Right, I agree. Yeah, like having the perception of, oh well, damn, like, so whatever's gonna happen is gonna happen anyways. And I mean that's like, that's like a very popular saying, in culture today. Like, everything happens for a reason. And and if you think about it, that kind of points to determinism.
Yeah.
But ultimately, yeah, like in our level of reality, yes, we do, I guess, have this perception of free will. And I mean, ultimately, religion aside, I mean, it doesn't matter, right? You could believe in whatever religion, whatever God, whatever higher power. Ultimately, I do think we do have a sense of free will, because that sense of free will kind of guides us to kind of make our characters, right? To make us who we are. Our decisions, going back to what I said, our decisions ultimately make us who we are. And then who we are end up cascading to make further decisions. Some good, some bad. But ultimately, I mean, it's up in the air. I hope Nick and I, to our listeners, I hope Nick and I kind of broke down, the essence of free will and determinism, and we leave it up to you guys to decide whether or not this existence is determined, or we are here kind of like on a plate somewhere under a microscope, and our observers are just observing the decisions we make freely. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed listening to this podcast episode. And remember, all of this, everything is just an experiment. Thank you for listening.